أدية مملة من هدامة برلمان السويد روبرت حنا.
Now we'll have a presentation by Swedish Parliament member Robert Hanna, and then he can take some questions, but please short questions, not lectures. Thank you.
Shalom alaikum. Shlomo. I will take this in English because this was what I was told. It's a pleasure to be here and welcome to my hometown, Gothenburg. And actually, I was raised in this place. If you see the red brick houses above here, it's called Briljantgatan to Pasgatan. This is actually where I was born, and not born, but raised. And my father, he was a singer. His name was George Hanna, and he sang here during maybe every month when I was when I grew up. And I basically grew up in this room that you're seeing here today. So this is actually, I would say, the heart of the Assyrian community here in Gothenburg. And as a member of parliament for the city of Gothenburg, I'm very honored and pleasured to welcome you here, and I'm very happy to see that we have the first annual meeting of the Confederation, and I hope that this will be something that we can continue and build on. I think this is the great start. So, I was told by Afram and the Assyrian Federation of Sweden to talk about lobbyism, or talk about how to influence Swedish politics, or how they have influenced Swedish politics, and I have influenced Swedish politics, and how you can do the same thing on the European level. Because we're all here because we have a mission. We all believe in Assyrian politics. We believe in Assyrian issues. So, I could stand here and talk about what I do in the Swedish parliament, but I think it's even better if I actually talk here about how we can influence more as an Assyrian nation, the politics of your own nations, but also the politics of the European Union and the politics in our homeland. You can take the next one. So I'm going to have a short presentation, maybe 20 minutes, talk about how you can actually influence politics. And then we're going to have a small discussion, and I will also, of course, talk about what I do. But people think it's rocket science. This is why I put this picture up here. People think that politics is rocket science, but actually it's mostly about human relations. I became a member of parliament in 2014. I was personally elected. I'm one of 10 members of parliament who are personally elected, who wouldn't be in parliament if they didn't get the votes of their people. And I got personally elected here in the city of Gothenburg, raising lots of my votes actually in the Assyrian community of Gothenburg. So actually I have the Swedish Assyrians to thank that I'm actually in the Swedish parliament. So I have done this journey not by myself, but with the help of the Assyrian Federation of Sweden. I've had the help of the Assyrian community here in Gothenburg. We have a lot of people in this room who helped me campaigning, and people told me I wouldn't be able to make it. Even members of the Swedish government were telling me, you can't make it, you can't get personally elected to the Swedish parliament. And I proved them wrong, and actually, as I said in this presentation, how to kick ass in lobbyism is also about kicking ass in politics in general. Because if you look at the Assyrian community in general, they have not been very active in politics. They have not been active in party politics. If you see the members of the Swedish political parties, there's been a few members of the political parties, but there have also always only been older gentlemen who've made it. But now we're seeing a new trend with the younger generation of the Assyrian community here in Sweden who are getting active in Swedish politics, who are making it, who are actually, we're also becoming more equal. We have a lot of girls actually getting involved in Swedish politics. And I think becoming a member of parliament, I actually not only can influence the Swedish politics, I can also influence young Assyrians here in Sweden and other places to actually get involved themselves. So we're actually seeing, how would you say? You can say we're seeing a journey that we've just started, and I think that we have a lot of success that we can look up on. And I would honestly want to say that the Assyrian Federation of Sweden is probably the best lobbyists in Sweden when it comes to national organizations. They are easily the best ones, the ones that get into the media. So actually Afram could be holding this seminar and this presentation that I'm holding, but I think I'm going to do it because he asked me to. So I'm just telling you, politics is not rocket science. It's about, affecting people. It's about having a message. It's about having a perspective and actually having goals that you're working towards. So let's have the next slide. So what you have to actually experience when you're talking about politics is, when you have Swedish Assyrian federations coming to politicians, you're only thinking as an Assyrian federation about Assyrian politics, Assyrian issues. But as a politician, I am a member of parliament. I sit in the party board of my party now, and I have a lot of other things to think about. So this is your competition, if you put it that way. Raising Assyrian issues is very important, but for a politician, they have other perspectives. They have, the issue of Russia. They have integration here in Sweden and Europe, that we have a lot of difficulties with that. We have Brexit. We have the welfare state to take care of. We have the war in Syria to think about. Not only the situation for the Syrians, but also for everyone. We have the climate change. We have Donald Trump to think about. We have equality to think about. We have security to think about. We have digitalization to think about, the future. So you have to have that perspective when you're lobbying as an Assyrian and for Assyrian issues, that, when you're talking to a politician, that politician needs to fit the Assyrian issue into the frame. And you have to be able to, convince them that your issue is important, that your issue actually matters. And if you're just thinking, if you don't have the perspective that you are competing with other political areas, you're going to lose. You have to have that in perspective. You have to tell them why this issue is more important than other issues, or you have to tell them how it fits in. For example, here in Sweden, I try to, every time that we talk about integration here in Sweden of immigrants, I always talk about the Assyrian community as a leading example. And you want to be that leading example. You want to be, a positive example for the Swedish society. And that's extremely important, and I'm going to get to it. But this is a very important thing to think about. We're not the only ones here. Size matters. This is actually a part of the women's union in my party. They have this commercial where it says, size does matter, wage after, how you work, not based on your gender. And what they say is that size matters. I put this number here, 120,000 people. What does that mean? 120,000 people is the number of people from our nation here in Sweden. We are 120,000 people. This is the first thing that I always inform politicians about. We are not a small group that doesn't matter. We are a big group with 120,000 people. We're more than 1%. We are more than 1% of the Swedish nation today, and we do matter. And you have to decide if you want to be a small player or a big player. And if you decide that you're a big player, then you're going to act like a big player, and you're going to be met as a big player. When the Assyrian Federation in Sweden is out talking to politicians, they know that they need our support because we are 1%. Whenever something happens in Swedish politics, and that affects the Syrian people, believe me that the people that are leading the municipality in Södertälje, for example, get scared because they know that the voters, can change because of that. So we do matter as a group. We are one of the biggest minorities of Sweden, and we need to tell people this all the time. This is the first thing you need to tell people. And it will be the same way in the European Confederation, because I guesstimation would be that we are one of the biggest minorities without a nation in the European Union, and we do matter. Our views do matter. We need to tell people this, and they need to understand it. And actually, the biggest and most important thing is to act that way. You can take the next one. And as a nation, as a people, you need to understand it's all about storytelling. What picture of the Assyrian nation, of the Assyrian people, do you want Swedish politicians, American politicians, European politicians to have? Do you want them to think of us as, petty, unsuccessful, not, likable? It's going to matter. If they see the Assyrian nation and the Assyrian people as a positive, successful group that has integrated well, that own half of the businesses here in Gothenburg, that are successful, that have young politicians, that actually have equality between the genders, Swedish politicians, European politicians are going to like you more. And believe me, I have some politicians, some groups that I don't want to work with because I feel like they are, their reputation is not good. So it's all about storytelling. If you want to tell the story, this is one of my voters actually, and she's from here. She's a Syrian, and I was asking her the story of her life, and actually she had a couple of tattoos on her hands because she's very old. She's from the St. Gabriel church just around here in the corner. And I met her during my elections, and I got the opportunity to speak to her. And I was asking about her tattoos here, and she told me, don't care about these tattoos. Look at this one. And she showed me the other tattoos that she had here. And she told me, this is from my pilgrimage to Jerusalem just a couple of years ago. And after this trip, I can die happily. This is all I wanted to do with my life. This is the positive stories of a church and a community that is successful here in Gothenburg, who has successful members, who have stories that can tell, that are compassionate. The stories that we want to tell is about a positive nation, a positive people who are friendly, who are successful, who want to partake in the Swedish society. This is extremely, extremely important for Swedish politicians in the way of them wanting to cooperate with a group. So to tell the story of a successful group is extremely important. So storytelling. Next one. And you need to understand the political game. I am in the political game every day. If you watch TV shows like Game of Thrones or I don't know, any show about politics, it is true. You see those dimensions. As a politician, there's always the political game that you have to be a part of. You can play the political game. Let me take a very, very easy example of this. Sefo. It is an extremely good example of this. Some politicians, most politicians work, the minority of the politicians work about, when they decide on a matter, they decide on what's right and wrong. Turkey committed genocide. It was wrong. They haven't acknowledged it. It was wrong. So I'm going to be for acknowledging Sefo. And a lot of politicians, when they're out of government, they will be for it. So I worked actively, taking the Social Democrats who are running the country right now, making them take a stand on this issue. Now that they are in government, they have another opinion because they have a benefit and cost analysis and what are the risks instead of, what's right and wrong. You have to understand the political game. If the Swedish government would acknowledge Sefo, then Turkey would be very mad at them. And they also have the migration crisis to think about, and they have other things to think about. So you have to understand, what are the risks, what are the costs, and how can I convince them to think like the way we do. As a member of parliament, now that the Syrian Federation, for example, helped me to get into Swedish parliament, the Minister of Foreign Affairs said that I prescribe on debates with her on the Sefo and other Assyrian matters. And because you got me in there, because you helped me to get in there, I can every month meet with the Minister of Foreign Affairs and tell them, when you were outside of government, you were saying, it was the right thing to do to acknowledge Sefo. But now that you're in government, you think it costs too much. So as a politician, you need to understand that this is the matters that we think. And as Syrian politicians, I can be, a pain in the ass to the government because I can always remind them of their promises and the cost analysis. So they also are always thinking, how will the Assyrian voters think about us if we don't acknowledge it? So that's also a cost. The more we talk about it, the numbers of people that we are, the more it will matter to them. So numbers do matter. Size does matter. Next one, please. Political inclusion also matters. This is actually taken in this room before it was renovated. They've renovated this hall, but this is actually taken in this room with my campaign. What I did, there's a difference between talking to people. There's a difference between having politicians come to the Syrian community and talk to them about politics and give them their political views, and the difference is inclusion. If a political party wants to have the Assyrian community's votes, they need to have Assyrian politicians. They need to include Assyrians in the politics. So what I do a lot is I tell the Assyrian young kids, you need to get involved. Because if you're included in politics, look, when I got involved in my political party, I could easily just give a phone call or an email to the ministers of government belonging to my party, which we did at that point. Whenever there was a demonstration, they would call me, they would say, what should I say? And I could teach them. Being involved in the political scene instead of being outside of the political scene is much, much more important, and it gives more value, you know. We have girls here like Muhadra, I don't know if she's here, maybe she's not here today, but she's involved in the Social Democratic Party, and that matters, because if the Social Dem wants information on the Assyrian community, they will call her. Whenever there's a demonstration on Assyrian issues, they'll call me, and I can give them the right information, you know, the right information that we want them to say. So this is extremely important to when you talk to political parties, also demand inclusion, also demand that you are part of, instead of sitting outside of the table, you want to sit inside the table. Next one, please. And this is very important when it comes to Assyrian issues. I can tell you, no matter how I do it, no matter which name I use, no matter what name I don't use, we have a name conflict. We do. And I can tell you honestly that we have a hill to climb, because when it comes to our names, we have different names. There's a conflict in this issue. And I can tell you the best thing to do is ignore the haters. If you know what you want to call yourself, just work it that way. And you can be the best at it. If you're the best at it, then that's what they're going to call you, and that's who they're going to call. So you can have a conflict, but you're never going to resolve it. You can only work, you know, forward. I have decided how I, you know, call myself, and I'm proud of calling myself Assyrian. If you want to call me something else, you can call me something else, but I always call myself what I am, and that's Assyrian. And it's extremely important. It's extremely important to see the way forward, because if I decide that I'm going to call myself other things just to make some people happy, it's not going to make myself happy. So deciding on, you know, working with the people that you can actually work with and work forward to your own issues. You know, there are other parts of the Assyrian community who use other names who do good things as well. I can say hi to them, I can be friendly with them, but I have my view, and I'm going to work straight, you know, forward, and I'm going to be clear on my point of view, because if I'm not clear, then the politicians are also going to be unclear. I can be very frank with you to say that there is an issue, you know, when people call us Christians, it's not that they don't know that we are also called Assyrians. It's that because they don't want to take a stand. It's because, you know, they're afraid of, you know, climbing on people or on making people upset. So we need to be more focused on, you know, telling our story, telling our work, and teamwork. You know, we have to work together, of course, but we're going to have to also be clear on what our point of view is. Okay, next one. This is actually a quote from, this is very important. There's a quote in the Quran that says, you know, I'm going to give you an example. When ISIS entered Iraq, there was a lot of demonstrations here in Sweden and here in Gothenburg as well. And I met some of the ladies afterwards, maybe a couple of weeks afterwards, and I told them, we're going to have a new demonstration. It's going to come up. And her answer to me was, well, we already demonstrated. We already told people what we think, and that's enough. I'm not going to go again. And she thinks that one demonstration is enough to, you know, succeed. This is enough. You don't need to do anything. And the politicians know our views. But this is a quote, and it's actually from, you know, if the mountain won't come to Muhammad, Muhammad has to come to the mountain. You know, we have a point of view that, you know, we told you once. We sent you the information. That's enough. Now you need to work. It doesn't work that way. You have to constantly go to the mountain where all the people are, and you have to constantly, you know, tell them your point of view. You can't stop talking about it. If you think that one time is enough, then you're fooling yourself. A politician needs to be reminded a lot of times, you know, what the political view is, what needs to be done, and the more you remind them, the more they're going to work towards it. Next one. I'm going to give you the basics of lobbying a politician. So quick steps, 10 steps on how to work for Assyrian lobbyism. First one, act like a big player. Size does matter. If you think that you're a small dog, then the rooms are not going to be open. If you tell people that we're 120,000 people, we're more than 1% of the Swedish people, we dominate a couple of municipalities in Sweden. If you want to matter, you know, if you want to succeed, you need to talk to us. Our votes matter. You need to be a group that thinks and acts like a big dog, you know. You don't want to be a medium-sized dog. You don't want to be a small dog. You want to be a big dog. And the way you act is actually going to, you know, show. If you tell people that you're a big dog, then you are going to be a big dog. The second one, take the initiative. Invite politicians. If you think that they're going to wait for you, you know, or they're going to come to you, it's not going to happen. The best lobbyists that I meet always invite me, you know. to meet with them and talk to them and take initiative. Most of the politicians, I can be frank with you, they know who they want to meet, but they don't have time to meet them. But if you take the time to actually call them, talk to them, establish a personal relationship, that's when you succeed. Third part, co-arrange activities with them. I have a lot of seminars. I can tell you, I get like 20 invites per day during the week. Come to this seminar, do this thing. I can tell you they go into my trash can immediately if it's not. I do housing policies. I'm the spokesperson on housing politics for my party. If it's a housing issue, then I look at it. If it's an Assyrian issue, then I look at it. If it's an issue regarding my district, Gothenburg, then I look at it. Otherwise, I'll throw it in the bin. But what I can do as an Assyrian politician with Assyrian lobbyism is ask them to be in the panel, or ask them to ask a question. Then they'll feel like they have a role to play, and then they'll come. So don't be afraid of asking people. The biggest thing you can get is a no. So co-arrange. Number 4, be prepared. Know their political views. One of the worst things that happens to me is when I meet with someone and they're telling me, let's take, for example, housing policies. And they're telling me, you should do this law in this way. And they haven't read our housing policies. We already think that way. If you, as Assyrian politicians, go to a political party or Assyrian lobbyists, go to a Swedish party and tell them you should think this way about ISIS, and they already do, then they're going to think you're, not that very smart. So you need to be prepared. You need to know the policies of the politicians that you want to, affect. You need to know their views already, and you need to be able to change their views. In order to do that, you need to know their views. So be prepared, know their political views. The 5th one, that's very important, make them take political stands. The best thing for a politician is when they don't have to answer. It's honesty. If you don't know the issue wherever, then you're not gonna get involved in it. But if you ask the political, let's for example say the Assyrian Federation of Sweden, I told them to make a survey during the elections 2014, give them your most important political views that you want to have their knowledge of it, and then they have to answer. And if they answer, they have to take a stand, and then they have to be prepared to meet the voters, 120,000 Swedish Assyrians who have their views, and you need to affect them. They'll know. For example, what I did, for example, during last year is I put a motion into the Swedish parliament to acknowledge what's happening, ISIS, as a genocide. I did it personally. No one else did. I did a private motion to the Swedish parliament. What happened is that it was taken up by my party and 2 other parties, and the rest of the parties said no. And now all the Syrian Swedes know that 5 of these parties don't want to acknowledge what's happening in Iraq and Syria as genocide. And that matters when they're going to vote. That does matter. So that's very important. Make them take a political position, use surveys, whatever. 6th one, establish personal relationships. Whenever someone mails me, and I know it's not addressed personally to me, I won't even answer those emails. I won't even answer those calls. If I feel like the person who I'm trying to lobby me, it wouldn't matter who I am. It just matters that I'm a politician. I'm not going to answer that. Establish personal relationships. Tell them the stories. If they're not very well informed, then inform them, Instead of seeing, someone who hasn't taken a stand or doesn't understand anything, which is very, if you talk to some of the politicians in some of the Swedish parties, they won't even know the difference between Assyrian and Syrian. They won't know the difference. Don't see them as stupid and useless. See them as people that you can influence. Very important view. And we haven't done that in the past. Actually, it's very interesting because I always get the question from Assyrian people. I find it I laugh at it always, but I don't laugh at them when they're seeing it, but I find it very funny because they're always telling me, which political party should I vote for? Which is the best party for Assyrian people here in Sweden? And it's an important issue, but you should not vote for whatever party is the best for the Assyrian people. You should vote for the party that you like the most, and you should tell them and demand that they get better in Assyrian issues. This is the way to work it, not say which party should I vote, because if all of us vote for the same party, which probably would be my party, but if you only look at Assyrian issues, but what I'm telling you is vote for the party that you believe the most in and demand action from them. Demand that they are better in certain issues and demand that they take stance. It's really important, because if we all voted for the same party, then none of the other parties would even be interested in becoming better in Assyrian issues. And this is the seventh part. Play the field. Be unfaithful. I mean, don't just talk to the parties that you know are good on Assyrian issues. In Sweden, I would say it's the Christian Democrats and the Liberal Party that I belong to. In some stances, the Social Dems can be good as well. But it doesn't matter. You need to influence all of them. You're not a political party like I am. I belong to a political party. I will always tell you to vote for the Liberals. But you are not. You want to influence everyone. And on the European level, especially, you want to influence everyone, because you know that, if you get one of the party groups there to work for Assyrian issues, then the other ones are going to be, affected as well, and they're going to have to take a stand. So be unfaithful, play the field, make everyone talk about Assyrian issues. You don't want just one party talking about Assyrian issues. Number 8, be available and source of information for them. They don't understand, they don't have the same information because they're not Assyrian, That stance, send them information, give them the knowledge. Don't see them as people that you can just throw away because they don't understand. Number 9, don't just talk to politicians, be politicians. This is what I told you before. Don't just talk about politicians. It's better to be a politician. If we had members of the European Parliament, for example, who are Assyrian, they would be able to influence 10 times more and talk to people 10 times more than we can from the outside. So actually talking and trying to get more young people, especially, to get involved in politics. And if you're involved in politics, I can tell you honestly that if I only do Assyrian issues, I will get nowhere. I sit in the party board of my party now, and it's not because of Assyrian issues. It's because I actually do other things. I do integration, I do housing policies, I do everything else. I see the Assyrian issues as my heart, as my soul, something that I have to do, but I also see that the best way of becoming successful as an Assyrian politician is not only to talk about Assyrian issues. When I get respected for being good at housing policies, on integration, on migration issues, that's when they're going to see if he's good at all these things, he's also going to be good in Assyrian issues. I can trust him when he says these things. So this is the way I've been working the field when it comes to Assyrian issues. It's not that I always put my head in and try to convince them on Assyrian issues every time. I actually talk about other things more. But when I do talk about Assyrian issues, they listen. And when I say don't just talk to politicians, talk to the media. There's no one in Sweden, I would say, who's better at talking to media like Afram here, the chairman of the Assyrian Federation of Sweden. He knows everyone, And because he knows everyone, whenever something happens, he gets it in the media. And who reads the newspapers? Politicians read the newspapers. And whenever something gets very active in the media and it gets into the newspapers 10 or 20 times, then also the Swedish politicians are going to understand, maybe this is important. Maybe I should have a stand on this issue. Maybe I should work this topic. So don't just think that, the fourth element of power in Sweden today is media, and in Europe as well. Work the media, have good relationships with media, because they are, they can be your message bearers. They can get your point out. And number 10 is extremely important. Understand the political process. This is extremely important. Every year I get maybe 10 or 12, 15 lobbyists who talk to me in September. And September is when according to the Swedish law, and this is when I can send in my motions to the parliament, and when my party writes our motions. But trust me, in September you're late. I've already gone to bed. It's over. I've written everything during the summer. I'm finished. If you want to influence politics, you need to understand the political process. Don't think that you can come in the last hour and ask for changes in my political view. It's not going to happen. When things are done, things are done. Be early, be prepared, be understandable of what they know and what they don't know. Also be very clear of your political views, and don't, if you're Assyrian, you're only Assyrian. Don't mix it, And also, work the field. It's extremely important. But also be prepared and be informed, know the political process. It's the most important thing, because you can't influence a politician, for example, in Sweden, in September or October when they're finished writing their motions. You can influence them during spring, because that's when they start thinking of what they should write. And this is when you can offer your knowledge. You can't offer the knowledge when it's finished already. The same thing when it comes to, holding demonstrations outside of the Swedish parliament when we've already, written our... So for example, let's say that there's a motion about helping with government aid to Iraq. And the motion has already been written, and the proposition from the government has already been written and sent in. If you come the day before the vote and you're demonstrating outside, well, the process is already finished because every party has already taken their stand. It's much better, like the way that Afram does it. He talks to them as soon, even before the proposition comes to the parliament, and actually meets with them, informs them, tells them the story, talks to the media, gets it in there. If you arrange a demonstration 12 hours before the vote or 2 hours before the vote, you're so late that, it's a waste of time. You need to be early, you need to be prepared, you need to know what you know, and you need to know your numbers. You're 1% of the Swedish people. You need to listen to me. Open the door. Next one. Oh, thanks. And I just want to finish. I'm going to finish up with this one because I think it's actually from Landstillingen in Södertälje, and it's a question to I think it's an Assyrian person, and the question is, how do you usually greet someone? And he says, I always shake their hand, but sometimes I do a fist bump as well. It's all about respect. It's quite funny. But what I'm trying to tell you about this is have fun. If you're not having fun working with Assyrian policies or working for the Assyrian issues or working together, you're not going to get anywhere. In politics or in lobbyism, if you don't like what you're doing, if you don't feel confident about what you're doing, if you don't believe in yourself, and if you're not having fun with the people you're working with, you're not going to get anywhere. I made it to the Swedish parliament with the help of a lot of Assyrian youth here in Sweden and here in Gothenburg especially. And I had a great time with them, and we had fun doing it. We had fun, arranging demonstrations. We had fun, handing out pamphlets. We had fun, doing the political work. And that's when you can actually succeed, having fun together, doing it together, having a common view and a common goal. And I am more than convinced that the Assyrian Confederation of Europe can work well together and that we can succeed on Assyrian issues, because it's not always about, achieving the goals like you planned. It's also the road, establishing an identity as a people, establishing, a common view as a nation is extremely important. It's not always about, reaching the goals. It's also about the journey and about, getting the Assyrian community here together. You might not succeed, for example, in Sweden to get Sefo acknowledged by the Swedish government, but you do succeed in bringing the youth together. I've never in my life seen so many Assyrian youth being proud of themselves than what happened with ISIS, after ISIS, because they came together, they showed their proudness, they wore their Assyrian flags to the demonstrations. Still today they're active in Swedish media. I think a lot of the youth in the Assyrian Federation in Sweden are active because of what happened in Iraq, because they saw that they were needed and they needed to do something together. And being not having a nation of our own, we need this as well, having a community where we can work together on common issues. And working together is just as important as reaching the goals, And I want to stop there, and we have time for questions, but I'm very happy to see her at least. Thank you.
شلومم يقرأ روبرت حنف سيخوينا غلبت كتلة قيومه ببرلمان السويد وكم تحقبينا ألمانيا ستافل بانت بسيمة كتلة يقورو إيبو ساقي جمشانا لخد فوليتي قورو كتلوخ إسوري عما سويد ببرلمان إيوم ثيدا كتلة تيدوت ودحتيت زبنو دحتيت وفريدا أفوليتي قورو سويدوي مقا كم هيمني بو ميدانه ومقا حاضرين جماحتي تعبو جماحتي زوزة علو عميدان بوا فريدان بأوتو.
I'll answer in English, okay, because I speak Eastern dialect. I'm probably the only national politician in Sweden who speaks the Eastern Assyrian dialect, but I do understand a bit. When it comes to the youth, the Assyrian youth and how they're active in Swedish politics, I would say before ISIS, it was very little. You know, if I talked to them about Sefo, maybe they know what Sefo was. If you asked them about their identity, they had troubles with it. But if you talk to them now and see how active they are, I mean, I can see there's been a huge difference of young people getting involved in Swedish politics. Maybe not enough of them have entered political parties, but they are getting more involved. If you look at the view, for example, the view of the Federation, Assyrian Federation of Sweden, it's always been, to be honest with you, it's been, seen as a group of old men coming together to, play games and talk about the politics of the home nation. Now you see a very big movement with young people, young Assyrians who are coming together, who are working together, and they have common views, not only on the politics of the home nation, which is very important to them because they work a lot on it. They are actually very active. Probably the federation, the only national federation in Sweden, the one that's the most active. And it's thanks to the youth. They are, arranging activities. They are doing things very well. But also, when it comes to talking about the Assyrian youth of Sweden, the Swedish Assyrian people, and they're also very active with them. And they are, the proudness of the Assyrian people here in Sweden has risen. They're much more proud of themselves. They're much more active. They're much more active on social media to talk about Assyrian issues. One of the biggest problems that we've had as an Assyrian nation is that we have not been organized. The organization has not been there, and you can still see that the organization has not been there. But now they are getting organized. Now Assyrian youth that are active from Gothenburg meet the one from Södertälje, they meet the one from Jönköping. They meet up in different terms, and we've seen a big change. And they're also very active in Swedish politics, and they want to take part in Swedish politics. But we still have a road to go. That you are getting organized here is very important, because I think organization brings also platforms. It brings the opportunity for young people to meet with each other, and this is something that we've lacked, and we have missed generations. I think I grew up here, just the houses up here, and I never actually was involved in the Assyrian Federation because I didn't know how to get involved, and I never actually got to meet with the young kids from Södertälje, and that's changing. And as a federation, you can choose to only be the representative of your members, or you can be the representatives of the whole nation. And that's a huge difference. And I think the Assyrian Federation is now, the representative of the whole nation. And they're actually taking a lot of stands for the young people to get involved. But I think we still have a road to go when it comes to being involved in the political parties, especially for women. I honestly, I think I only know one woman who holds, for example, a position in a municipality, being, almost like in the board of a municipality. That's the highest position as a woman, a Syrian woman in Sweden has in Swedish politics. Whilst we have 6 members of parliament, I would say, who have a Syrian background. Half of them, don't call themselves Assyrians. Half of them call themselves Assyrians 2 weeks before every election. So there's a difference. But we still have a long way to go. I don't know if I answered, your whole question.
What is the view of the Swedish parliament and politicians about our issue in our homeland, Assyria?
Yeah.
Do they see a chance for our nation in our homeland?
It's different. I can tell you, that was part of my presentation. Some of the parties, like the Liberal Party, like the Christian Democratic Party, they have in their political programs Assyrian issues. For my party, I can honestly tell you it's not because of me, it's because of a politician named Ninos Maraha from Södertälje, who actually wrote every motion, who actually was working for Assyrian issues, and then it became a part of our program. And then I entered the party and I had everything ready for me already. But you have some of the parties who don't know about Assyrian issues, who don't really, they don't know the issues. Then you have some parties who, at some points, can work for Assyrian issues because we are a big group. But I would say that it's mixed. You have some parties who work for certain issues, you have some parties who don't know enough, and then you have some parties who don't think it's important enough. So all of them work towards, our nation, our politics, and our home nation, but you could see it in the vote for example, acknowledging the genocide. It was 3 parties who acknowledged, 5 parties who didn't, and we need to work on them. When it comes to government aid, I'm working very intensively to get government aid going directly to the minorities in Iraq, and we're still not getting there, but we're working on it. But what's happened, the difference is now that I entered parliament, I almost every month meet with the Minister for Foreign Affairs or the Minister of Development Aid, and they're afraid because they can see as a Syrian Swedish politician, I am making them look bad. I make them look bad, so they actually are thinking about it, they have to act about it, they have to think about it, and that's the change that we've seen in the recent years. But it's mixed. That's my answer probably.
Thank you. We don't have time for any more questions.
تودي لبيا شدانا بقارة خانة